everybody, it's Nerdy here. So I recently graduated from Alberta University of the Arts, formerly known as ACAD or Alberta College of Art and Design, and probably also known by a lot of ArtTube watchers as the art school that Lavendertown went to. And if you don't know who Lavendertown is, she's a comic artist and YouTuber with over 2 million subscribers that makes a lot of content about art creation, character design, and drawing challenges. Her content is generally pretty harmless, and she's never been in any major YouTube controversies aside from having some of her perfectly valid and personal art opinions getting dogged on from time to time. I'm subscribed to her channel, and I find her content to be pretty fun to watch, but I used to be a much more frequent viewer of her videos back when I was in high school. And do you know what I was also doing in high school? Fretting about going to art school. Lavendertown has made a decent amount of videos about her art school experience, and they were my rock when I was in high school because it was my biggest frame of reference for what it would be like to attend. I did apply to other schools, but ACAD or AU Arts as it began going by in my first year was always going to be the best option for me. It's not too far from where I grew up, and its design program really appealed to me. My biggest fears going into this school, though, were related to the videos Lavendertown created about her experience attending. Although she emphasizes that she really values her time at ACAD, a lot of her videos do focus on the negatives of the school that made 17-year-old me freak the fuck out. I fretted a lot about whether or not it would be worth it for me to attend and if I could handle the scary cutthroat nature of the school, to reference one of her video titles. Given that Lavendertown graduated in the year of our Lord 2017, I feel like it might be valuable to talk about what it was like to attend this school from the perspective of a recent graduate. I'll be hopping back and forth between her videos about ACAD as we go, but I'll make sure to list where I'm getting each point from so I don't take her out of context. Her experience is hers and mine is mine, and a lot of her advice did help me acclimate to the weird environment that art school fosters. So if Lavendertown actually ends up stumbling across this video, thank you for your insights. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about my experience at AU Arts through the lens of Lavendertown videos. 1. The Blood Feud. To start this off, why don't we quickly address the most infamous point in one of Lavendertown's most popular videos about her experience at ACAD, the Design versus Fine Arts Blood Feud. In Lavendertown's My Scary Cutthroat Art School video, she discusses the stressful rivalry between the design and fine arts department at ACAD. It clearly impacted her experience at the school, as she dedicated a whole section of this video to describing what it was like to be in that environment. Watching that video as a teenager, I had a lot of worries that I wouldn't be able to handle that drama, so I'm relieved to say that the Blood Feud was nowhere to be found during my run at AU Arts from 2019 to 2024. Yippee! I don't know what exactly happened in the years between Lavendertown graduating and me enrolling, but I do remember the Blood Feud being frequently brought up during my first year orientation. The question, is the Design versus Fine Arts Blood Feud legit, was asked so many times you could tell the older students leading orientation activities were getting so tired of us asking. They constantly denied it, obviously, and of course you assume that's because they're doing what they can to make sure us first years have a positive impression of campus life. However, once I actually started going to these classes, I noticed that the vibe was generally chill and there was no animosity between the two programs, neither between the students or the teachers. Another thing I noticed is that they never paired off different majors for projects like they did while Lavendertown attended. I do believe that the Blood Feud was something that was a huge problem back then. I obviously don't want to discount Lavendertown's experience, but they must have found a workaround in the years between her graduating in 2017 and my first year in 2019. And honestly, what a relief. 2. The first year experience. One of the main things that is still accurate to Lavendertown's art school videos is the way your first year at ACAD or AU Arts functions. During your first year, you do not have a major. This is done in order to encourage students to explore and try out different forms of art before committing to a set path. You're not completely on your own, though. Professors often remind you of all the course requirements you have to fulfill in order to pick your desired major, and all the design majors require an approved portfolio submission. I remember some of my classmates found it to be frustrating since a lot of the kids gunning for the design program wanted to get into it right away, but I found that year of exploration and relearning fundamentals to be very valuable. If only it wasn't cut short due to worldwide pandemic reasons, but we'll get to that later actually. On the topic of portfolios, it wasn't too hard to get into the design program. If you end up taking the classes that qualify you for your desired design major and complete projects on time while maintaining solid grades, there's a high chance you'll get in without a hitch. The school did its best to regulate stress by constantly reminding first years that a lot of the projects they were currently working on would help contribute to building the kind of portfolio they were looking for. Literally all of my portfolio works except for one were class assignments, and as you can see, I've been flashing them on the screen here for posterity's sake. Now, are the first years treated like shit? Kind of. Won't lie. Obviously, the reason why this happens is because art schools tend to have a notoriously high first-year dropout rate, and Lavendertown does mention this in her videos. It makes sense that they wouldn't want to spend so much money pampering students who are likely to drop out. Hooray for capitalism! But you know those absolutely awful desks and stools Lavendertown mentions in her scary cutthroat art school video? They're still there, and they're just as uncomfortable and gross looking. Although, a difference I've noticed is that they try not to subject you to those horrible desks as often. For me, I had 2 4-hour-long classes where I was made to work in absolutely painful and unergonomic drawing conditions. But surprisingly, my first-year design fundamentals classes were held in the same classrooms that the 2nd to 4th year students had access to. AKA the really comfortable seats, clean tables, and windows. Yes, the school was designed by someone who made prisons. The justification for this is to help control the amount of light in the rooms, but damn, those classes are pretty sterile and sad looking for an art school. And yes, regardless of your major, the classes are really long. My usual studio class blocks were from 8:30 a.m. to 12:50 or 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Because first-year classes were so jam-packed with information just so you could get a good shot at making it into the design program, those 4 hours were all used up. And it was excruciating, especially when you're taking around 5 classes a semester in your first year and 3 of them are 4-hour blocks while the other 2, which are normally art history and English, are around 3 hours long. The difference as years go by is that once you've picked your major, professors trust that you know how to use your time effectively, and they'll allow you to leave class early after lecture and critique portions if you wish. I also want to mention that a lot of what I'm describing only really applies to the experience of design stream AU Art students. I wasn't a fine arts kid, so I can't say much for how the first year experience goes, and I would rather not misrepresent it. I do have a feeling though that a lot of the people who will be watching this video and are curious about AU Arts based on Lavendertown's experiences would most likely be aspiring design kids though. I see you. 3. Deadlines and expectations. At this point, I think it's valuable to get into the more technical aspects of my art school experience. What I'll be talking about here most likely also applies to art schools in general, but I think it's valuable to talk about these little details since they were major points in Lavendertown's videos. So first off, deadlines. Are they still crazy cutthroat here? Yeah, kind of. Art school heavily values deadlines, mostly to reflect how the corporate art industry works. But as years have gone by and technology and work environments have changed, meeting them is a lot less of a hassle. My experience at AU Arts was weird. I witnessed in real time the effects of a pandemic-based shutdown, online schooling, and what the aftermath of an entire year of mandated remote learning did to art school culture. For example, a big change they made post-pandemic had to do with how project submissions work. Before the pandemic, all of my project submissions would have to be either printed out or mounted properly, and you'd have to be physically there on the day it was due in order to hand in and discuss your work at critique. Not doing so would either result in getting a lower grade if you were within 30 minutes late, and a 0 beyond that. I feel like quarantine made my school realize how absolutely ridiculous that policy was, and as my years at AU Arts progressed, they became a lot more open to digital hand-ins via email and file sharing websites. The only place physical submissions or USB hand-ins were required were for optional gallery events. So what did they want to see in these submissions then? Including as much of your thought process as possible is still a heavy contributor to your success in the design program. During my time at AU Arts, we were often expected to make PDFs or PowerPoints of our thought process that would go along with the final piece, and then we'd present them to the class on final hand-in day. In Lavender-Town's Crazy Cutthroat Art School video, she mentions that there used to be some sort of unspoken minimum requirement of the process that you had to share in order to get a high grade, and they'd mark you down if they didn't find your thought process sufficient. But I never really noticed that being a case during my degree. It was present in first year studies, but once I picked my degree, they were a lot more lenient. I don't think you have to stress too much about having every little detail of your thought process cataloged in your final PDF, especially since a lot of the time you're going to be doing constant check-ins with your professor throughout the project where they will actually witness you coming up with your ideas firsthand. All you have to do is make sure that your final hand-in is a simple and concise breakdown of how you got to your final product. 4. Random rapid fire. Before I get into the last major section of this video, I want to touch on some aspects that Lavendertown mentions in her art school video that don't warrant too much of a breakdown, either because they're still true or they're minor changes between her experience and mine that sort of build up on one another. A lot of these will also be taken from her Lies They Tell You in Art School video and 5 Things You Should Know Before Art School video. Alright, here we go! Does art school still hate fan art? Not really. Actually, I had more than one project that was essentially make book fan art and expand upon that in my second and third year. For the most part, a lot of my professors understood that times were changing and creating fan work and posting it online could help people get jobs. Also, to add to that, no, art school doesn't really hate anime art styles anymore. If they did, I wouldn't have gotten high grades on all of these projects. Do you still have to spend tons of money on absolutely unintuitive art programs? Yes, and it's excruciating. Basically, everything Lavendertown says in her Lies They Tell You at Art School video about Adobe is still true. And if you were in the animation program, just take what she said about Adobe and apply it to Toon Boom. But if you were a savage like me and did everything on Clip Studio EX and then saved it as a Photoshop document, you were able to escape from some of those learning curve issues. But regardless, they still find ways to make you spend money on these absolutely clunky and expensive programs. And if you know how much monthly subscriptions to Adobe and Toon Boom cost, you'll know how much of a money sink that is. And speaking of money sinks, do they still require you to buy super expensive art supplies? Yes, especially in first year. Lavendertown specifically mentions these expensive toxic acrylic paints, and they still make you buy that. You know why they make you buy it? To match a color wheel in the color theory classroom for one project. That's it. I wish I was lying, but I still have those paints now, and I am trying my hardest to get my money's worth out of them. But as a primary digital artist, it's a slow go. Do they still only enforce 2 artistic paths? No. While majors are still split up to accommodate these 2 main paths that Lavendertown mentions, being gallery and corporate life, at least in my classes, professors made an effort to constantly remind us that there were other ways for us to get paid for art creation. It's weird because the school is structured in the way that Lavendertown describes, but it feels like the faculty are trying their best to reassure students that there are many paths you can take in order to find a fulfilling art career. Do they still overinflate the industry connections you'll make? Yes, and it's still as disappointingly misleading as Lavendertown describes. I remember when I was applying to this school, I saw a headline on a brochure I got saying that 80% of graduates find jobs within a year of graduation. To me, that implied that big companies were constantly there to give you internships and opportunities. But no, that wasn't really the case. The connections you make will most likely be with your fellow classmates who are trying as hard as you are to make it, and also your teachers, who are normally working artists themselves. I can count the amount of professional artist talks in my 5 years attending AU Arts on maybe 2 hands if I'm being generous. And even then, it was simply the school inviting professional alumni to do Q&As with current students rather than inviting industry representatives offering internships and work opportunities. If my school provided resources like that, they made it difficult to figure out when and where it was happening. Okay, rapid fire over. 5. The art school bubble. The last thing I want to talk about before closing this out is something that applies to art schools in general. Something that both Lavender and I agree on. The art school bubble. There's certain people you'll meet and certain things you'll get accustomed to while attending art school that truly make it feel like its own world. I mean, you grow up being the art kid TM, where anything you shit out is gold. But then you go to a school where everyone else was the art kid TM, and suddenly you're not so great anymore. You get humbled a lot during your first year, and while at first it can be really degrading, if you push through it and commit to learning, you'll find yourself becoming a much better artist. I don't think I would have improved as much if I never ended up going to art school. I think the most important thing Lavendertown says about this art school bubble phenomenon is that you have to remember that the world itself is not an art school. If you have a prof or a classmate that doesn't understand your vision, it's not the end of the world, and there'll be plenty of people, artists and non-artists alike, who will connect with the work you create. Something I wish I did more in my experience at art school is reach out and make friendships with different types of artists and non-artists. Honestly, getting a person who isn't full of art brain rot to look at your work is really valuable, especially if you've been beating yourself up over little details or stressing over non-consequential things. Something I look forward to doing now that I've graduated is becoming friends with people who are different kinds of artists or have passions that exist outside of the world of art entirely. The art school bubble is wild, and you should definitely indulge in it, but don't get too swept up, or you'll feel major whiplash once you graduate. 6. Conclusion. All in all, Lavendertown's videos really helped me mentally prepare for the absolutely wild experience that is attending art school, and I seriously value all of her insights. I hope that this video also helped some aspiring art school students get an idea of what to expect if they end up attending or applying. Obviously, art school and college in general aren't for everyone, but as someone who likes working with deadlines and having constant projects to complete, art school really helped me improve in my art and work ethic. Anyways, if you wish to support my work and help me create more videos about art and fandom and weird shit that maybe brings me mild brain rot, all links to my social media accounts, online store, and commission prices are down below. If you're unable to support me financially, a comment on this video or a subscription to the channel if you really enjoy my content are more than enough. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever the hell that may be. Bye!